Hi, everyone. My name is Meredith Perry. I'm the managing producer of sports at MassLive. We're in a really exciting time of the high school sports season. The statewide postseason has started up. Football postseason kicks off tonight, and we're thrilled in our downtown Springfield office to have none other than Bob Baldwin, the executive director of the Massachusetts Interscholastic Athletic Association, with us today. We'll hit on a lot of topics, some of them reader submitted, but for the most part, we're just thrilled to have you here, Bob. Thank you so much for coming down.
I am absolutely thrilled to be here. As a graduate of Springfield College, any time and any excuse I can have to get to Springfield is one that I will take. So I'm really excited to be here.
Terrific. You know, to start off, you just finished your second complete year as the executive director, and I know you had a lot of goals coming in. So what do you feel like you've accomplished in those first 2 years, and what are the major ones you're still working toward?
So, I used to run. I don't run anymore. Now I just walk. And I remember the Gel Nimbus brand of shoe from ASICS was, I think I went from Gel Nimbus 12 to Gel Nimbus 18. Every year was an iteration to try and make it better. So in the long run, we're out there listening. We're out there building relationships. And what can we do to make things better? What can we do to explain an objective rationale for what we do? And the God's honest truth is I'm just starting year 3. I'm learning things as they come and say, well, why do we do that? So the long term is you don't always have to do things the way we've always done them. And the short term is bringing transparency, building relationships. It's okay to tell why we're doing something, and it's okay to communicate to as many people as you can why we do what we do.
Now, you started your position at such a fascinating time because not only were we coming out of really the first full year of the pandemic, but the major transition to a statewide tournament. So we're in year 3 of statewide tournament. What kind of lessons has the MIA learned about this transition? And, are there concerns or anything as the process has continued and we've seen where maybe there are some ebbs and flows?
Sure. I remember walking in, we started Arbiter, which was a system in which athletic directors and everyone processes the data and schedules the games and finds out who wins and loses. Online ticketing and a statewide tournament with power rankings in the fall of the first year. I think what we've learned is that the power rankings are working, and that's with the end in mind. When you look at the end of the tournament and you look back and you say that 82 to 83% of the seeds ended up being where they belonged, that means that maybe the numbers were correct going into the tournament. I think there's a lot of things you can continue to learn. I know that the TMC, Sherry Bryant, Jim Clark, a lot of integral people there are constantly listening for ways to say, oh, that makes sense. What should we do here? There have been a lot of passionate discussions with athletic directors, coaches, principals, and we listen to those and see how we can incorporate to make it even better.
Some of the feedback we've heard about the power rankings has to do with the margin of victory. It feels like that's always what comes up. And something a football coach recently said to one of our reporters was, if I'm up by 10 at the end of the game and I'm currently ranked 17th or 18th in the power rankings, there's a part of me that feels like I need to push to get to that 14, even though that may not be the most sportsman-like thing to do. How do you feel like sometimes that margin of victory maybe comes in contradictory to the philosophies of the MIA?
It's a great question. We hear that. I was a former coach, and there were times they'd be down in basketball, but I'll give the times that we're up in a basketball game and you're up 12 or 15, there's no margin of victory. And when do you bring in your bench players? How long do you keep your star player in to maybe get them a more point per game average at the expense of turning an ankle, having something happen? So I think, when to make those decisions have always been there. A power ranking is for a seed in a tournament. Yes, it's important to many, but ultimately it's winning a game, but it is setting apart. We looked at the data, and I think in basketball, the average margin of victory is between 15 and 20 in most games. So I heard an example of this, and I'm just going to point it out, that somebody actually called a timeout with 1.2 seconds to go, and they were up 7, and called a timeout to run a play to go up 10. That's wrong. That's not how the game should be played. That's not how the game should be coached. I made the point that I would bring the person in the next day and say, what are we doing? I think when we all coach, we coach to improve the young student athlete for what they're going to be later in life, to win a game. And the power ranking is just an objective methodology to try and create a statewide tournament that's fair. Briefly, I'll just tell you that as a coach, we used to play teams that were 20-0. And those teams were 20-0 in an unbelievably soft conference. And if they were 20-0 and I was 10-10, I couldn't wait to draw them because I beat them by 15 to 30 points. And so the power ranking does give a more objective, and it's proven out to be at the end of the tournament, way of seeding people. I just think, well, let's coach to end the game the way it should be. If we win by 7, 8, 10, it'll all work out in the end.
It has been interesting to see the difference in the way the rankings shape up. You know, in Western Mass, there's always been a mathematical, at least for the past 10 years or so, a mathematical formula. And so we would see the other side of the state, and we'd see those 20-0 teams lose to a 10-10 team.
Yes.
And really the work Jim Clark has done to put all of this together and try to make it as equitable as possible is really a feat compared to where it was a few years ago.
It really is. And so we had a game last night in which the team made the tournament and they didn't have a win. Mm-hmm. It's not the first time that's happened. They won their first tournament game. They won their first game of the season last night in the tournament. If you're playing because of your geography or in your conference, an unbelievably difficult conference or where you are in a division, and all of a sudden you get points for the power of the team that you're playing as well. And all of a sudden, you still have some hope to be there. And so it's happened in baseball 2 years ago. It happened last night in volleyball. And then we've also had a 32 beat a 1. Mm-hmm. And so that's happened in the NCAA. So it's really cool that everybody that gets in the dance has a chance. And you get in based on an objective reference point that was communicated to you before the tournament started. So the rules of the game are set forth before we start. These are the rules of the game. This is how it works. Like it, don't like it, and this is how it pans out at the end.
Now, looking at that specifically from a football perspective, we had reader Zach LeBeau send us a question about postseason football rankings in particular. When you see football teams who are 7-1, 6-2, and they wind up just on the outside of the tournament, what goes through your mind on that? I mean, it's great to see a team that hasn't earned a win yet but played solid competition all season get that win. But when you see a team that's 7-1 not make it, that also isn't the best feeling.
So you asked early on the philosophy, the belief system, and I went long term. I'm going to go long term again. But ultimately, the Massachusetts Interscholastic Athletic Association should be for educational-based athletics first. When you're 35 years old, what kind of a human being are you going to be because of what you learned in interscholastic athletics? Second of all, let's maximize participation during the regular season and get as many student athletes participating, because when you're involved in sports, you have a sense of belonging, you have a sense of membership. It's good for you. People who are in dance and drama and band and sports are successful in school. And the third on the list is the statewide tournament. The third on the list. Now, people see that as the most important. There's only going to be one from each division that wins. Getting in is good for your community, but these teams are still going to be playing games the rest of their season. They're still going to be playing on Thanksgiving Day, if that's still the tradition, which it is in most, and they're still going to end the year with a certain record. Objectively, through a power ranking, they fell short. Does it sound odd? It does. But when you look at what used to happen of, like I said, the 20-0, losing by 16-20 in the first round to a 16 team, this is more objectively correct. And it's a message I think that most people are realizing is if you're in a certain conference or you're playing a certain schedule, you need to schedule a little differently. And if you know that from the get-go, then that's something that you can do moving forward. I get it, but at the same time, if that team has played a really, really difficult schedule all year and they're, 4-5 or 3-5, and they can make it. The rules are set forth before the season starts of how to get in and how not to get in. But total sensitivity to student athletes and teams when that happens.
So off of that, and our reporters primarily can speak from what has happened in Western Mass, but we've heard from coaches that they've had difficulty scheduling, particularly in football, scheduling independent games against those stronger teams in Eastern Mass. Now, I know the MIA is not able to, specifically get their hands in on that, but is there a way for the MIA to encourage those cross-region games so that you can have a team play that more challenging opponent?
So if you look at who's playing who since the statewide tournament began, the statewide tournament has created relationships that never existed. Two teams that traveled an hour and a half to play each other are now scheduling each other for all sports across the board because they've now gained a relationship. So I really believe it is flipping. I really believe that. We see that. We see teams playing teams that they never thought of playing. And the other misnomer is being an executive director of Massachusetts means that you're also around executive directors from around the country. And when we said we just started a statewide tournament and people were complaining about driving an hour and 45 minutes to their first round game, they said, excuse me, we live in North Dakota. Our regular season away games are 7-hour trips. And someone said there's a pass in Wyoming that when it's snowing, it's 13 hours. But when it's not snowing, you can go through the pass and it's 6 hours. And point being, we're not Rhode Island, but we are in a smaller state. The relationships that are built with a little bit of travel and a little bit of camaraderie, I think is growing more than decreasing with the statewide tournament.
Now, we have a couple of more reader questions for you here on the postseason in particular. Samantha Blanchard asked a question about postseason scheduling.
Sure.
She has a son who is on a boys soccer team, and she moved around her schedule because his game was supposed to be tonight, and then yesterday was told, nope, sorry, it's Friday, and now she can't go to what might be his last game. And so she asked what the MIA has involved with scheduling. Now, I know that's not necessarily MIA, right. That's the athletic directors, but can you maybe walk us through what the process is when you have to get all of these games done, and it does lead to some fluidity with dates?
So if I'm an athletic director and I'm finding out on Sunday about my football team and on Monday about field hockey and on Tuesday about volleyball and Wednesday about soccer, and I have boys and girls teams, there's a possibility I have, one field, one site, away games, busing, what's going on in the school. Is there a play going on? Is there a National Honor Society night? Things are happening in schools. The MIA doesn't schedule the games. We do at the end. We do toward the end, but early on in the early rounds, we give a window of time in which games can be scheduled. And it's just a Herculean task for the athletic directors to juggle all of this, to coordinate it with, now let's take another team that is, 50 minutes away. They have 6 conflicts, and you're literally trying to find ways to get it done in our time frame of, maybe it's a 4-day period for 2 days for prelims and 4 days for first round. And we want everything done by the second Saturday. Who knows what the weather's going to be like? The fall. So I respect and understand where the parent is coming from, but it's not something that anyone's doing maliciously. It's just who knows what's going on at that school, who knows what's going on at another school. And then if you want to just compound that, let's move to the spring. Because the tournament starts. There's this day and that day and this trip and this senior trip and this graduation. And it's very difficult for the athletic directors to try and find ways to make it work.
The last reader question we have actually came from a handful of people, and it was about online ticketing for postseason games.
Sure.
And they were wondering what the reason is for the online ticketing. Specifically, a couple of people said, we don't have debit or credit cards, and now we feel like we can't go to the game. So why the online ticketing, and is there any potential backup in place for people who can't do that?
So we have heard very, very positive from people who, right, when somebody hears something and says, oh, this is not the way it should be, and then they experience it, they're like, oh, that was really better. So first of all, the lines are less. There used to be lines in which people could miss the first quarter or the first portion of a game. People walk in with their phones. That we now have provided schools with readers or little iPads in which they can do something right at the gate. A lot of the reason is accountability at the gate. In the world we live in today, and the MIA is doing this. We're behind the times. If you go to Gillette Stadium, it's cashless, and if you go to Fenway Park, it's cashless, and that is where we're going in the world we live in. We've advised, we never ever want to turn anyone away. I think of the people who go to every Thanksgiving Day game, and they've been there for 40 straight years, and they're a group of 74-year-olds who are walking in, and they're looking at you like, what do you mean? It's the individual site is. I don't know of anyone who's saying you need to go home. Okay. But at the same time, we're not backing off of it. It just makes total sense. It's where we're going. It's where we're going, and it alleviates a lot of things going with GoFan, which we've also found. Again, the state tournament started it, and now many, many, many schools are going to it for the regular season. Many schools are going to it for their theater productions. They're realizing that, oh my God, they sign up ahead of time, they show up, they show it, they walk in, it's over. as opposed to, back and forth of cash and how does the cash get distributed and how does that all work. We've clearly seen success in this, and success breeds replication, and if somebody's going away from it, then it must not be good. If most people are heading toward it, totally get it where people are coming from, but the first year of implementation was a little rocky, that we were staying our course. Now we're into year 3. I think most people understand that that's the way we're going to do business.
Now, to back away from the postseason a bit and hit on something you've mentioned a few times here, Thanksgiving football.
Yes.
Massachusetts has such a storied history with Thanksgiving football. I mean, there are more than 24 rivalries that span more than 100 years in Massachusetts. But it feels almost like the Thanksgiving Day football game has lost its luster a bit recently. And what we hear from a lot of our coaches is that part of that has to do with when the game is played in relation to the postseason and teams not having played some of them for a few weeks. Where does the MIA's responsibility fall with a tradition like that, when there's also a responsibility to the overall student athlete and the postseason and all of those combining?
Again, I'm a former coach and former principal, and the most exciting time to this day of the year is the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday prior to the people coming back, the half day Wednesday, the doing something with a family before that. The game itself, I stand in the same place, in the same spot when Fairhaven plays Dartmouth every year. I've been to the game for I don't know how many straight. I'll be that 74-year-old soon that's walking in. I say it's no different than margin of victory. What I mean by that is it's what you make of it. I am going to play my kids if I'm the coach, because that rivalry against that school is something I'll remember the rest of my life. The number of teams that really are playing the next week are very, very few. And more of these teams are playing their full squads. I think early on you could see people pulling back and not playing, but it's a game. Your kids deserve that game. That's my opinion, but you play everything you do, you play to the best of your ability to be successful. And so you owe that to everybody who comes to that game. Somebody said it a long time ago that people who come to a Thanksgiving Day game look for the number that they were in high school. And so now that number's not out there because there's a game the next week. And I understand that people are prioritizing things. My opinion is you play with margin of victory to win by, as many of you as you can in a respectable manner. And on Thanksgiving Day, you play to beat your rival.
One last question for you. You and I have had this conversation about how one of your goals was to really bring the entirety of the state together.
Yes.
There has at times been a perception in Western Mass that they're almost a forgotten region.
Absolutely.
So where do you come in on that? What has been your goal in trying to unite the entire region, and what specifically have you done in the past year or so for Western Mass?
Try and be a voice. There's a couple. So I live in a coastal town in the South Coast, almost close to Rhode Island, called Fairhaven. And Fairhaven is outside of 495. When I was a superintendent of schools, I used to always try and fight the fight that there's a world that exists outside of 128. And then I started to, and so Fairhaven's outside of 128. And then I started to extend that to 495. And I believe that I need to be a voice for those communities that are outside of 128 and 495. And we fight like heck and support for all of our schools, 384 member schools. But there was a suggestion that we have universal cutoff dates in the spring because of all the issues that we have to do it before Memorial Day. And so we went to the West and we met with in a district meeting. And I said, this is a suggestion that's out there. What do you feel? And, you're in Mount Greylock and you're saying, I don't get out of my field sometimes until April. And I need Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket say, I need Memorial Day weekend to finish my schedule because it's a big rivalry between and amongst us. So I pride myself my whole life of being the voice for all. And so when somebody comes and says, this is the way it should be done, well, not every athletic director is full-time with support staff. Many athletic directors are teaching 5 periods a day and receiving a small stipend, and they're asked to do the same job. And so I just want to be the voice for the entire state. As I said at the beginning, I love coming out to Western Mass, every excuse I can get to be out here. And our District 2 and 3 is Central Mass. The South Coast region where I'm at, Up north, we were in Haverhill for a meeting. We also have our liaisons in the office attend each district meeting that they have. So Sherry Bryant yesterday was in Northampton meeting with the ADs and principals when they have their meetings. We are all assigned to different spots. We listen to what they have to say, and then we come back on a weekly basis and say what's out there. If what's out there is just in one specific spot, it's unique to them. But if what's out there is for everyone, then we can talk about it. And then we also need to protect the what's out there when somebody suggests something that does affect them.
Well, we're certainly glad to have had you come out here today. Thank you so much. And, MassLive will have all sorts of high school sports coverage coming over the next few weeks, especially as the postseason continues and move forward. So make sure you're heading to highschoolsports.masslive.com. Once again, I'm Meredith Perry. This was Bob Baldwin, and we hope you have a great rest of the day.